G'day viewers. Now I've just built this shelf to tidy up my shed a bit and get some gear off the bench and up out of the way. So I've just built this shelf and as you can see it gets my set of screwdrivers up there on that angle where it won't slide off. I've got some metric and imperial drills and bibs and bobs. So I just built that and I'm trying to get some gear off the bench. And I thought, I'll put all my battery chargers in one place. So I've got an 8 amp battery charger there. And this is probably the most useful thing here. This is from the 1970s. It's a battery tester. And it's got a big 100 amp resistor in it. And a knob on the top. And you push that and it puts a 100 amp load. And you read the voltage drop. It's actually quite a good thing. But the reason I'm thought I'd make this video is it's a stupid one, as all my videos are, but it's about a company called McKenzie and Holland. Because I built that shelf, I'm trying to get some gear off the bench, and I thought, I'm putting these battery chargers up here, and I'm rummaging through my gear, and I found these two battery chargers. And I'll do this one. I think is from the 1970s, and as you can see, it's Westinghouse, made in Australia, 612 volt auto charger, Westinghouse Brake and Signal Company Proprietary Limited. And then this appears to be exactly the same thing, but I'm guessing this one's the 1930s or 40s. It's got the logo MHK, which is obviously McKenzie and Holland, but I don't know what the K is because they got bought out by Westinghouse. And this is exactly the same thing. It mentions Melbourne and Brisbane here. I love the fuse. I love the fuse on this one. See, it's a piece of fuse wire from here to here. Now, normally I love stuff like that because it's very simple and cheap. Rather than, because in those days everyone would have fuse wire in the fuse box. But in an instance where you're charging a battery and you have explosive hydrogen gas being generated, I think I'd rather see a HRC fuse. I'm guessing this one's just a glass fuse. I think a glass fuse would be a lot safer. But this one has a approval number. This one doesn't have an approval number. That's why I'm trying to understand how old it is. I'm thinking it might be 1930s. I don't know when the SEC was invented, the State Electricity Commission of Victoria, that organised all the approvals and stuff. Maybe it preceded that. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about McKenzie and Holland because I was born in a suburb of Melbourne, about 4 miles west of the GPO, the General Post Office, in the centre of the city of Melbourne, a little suburb called South Kingsville, and the only employer in that suburb, the only factory really, was McKenzie and Holland. Now, I was born in 1958 and I used to walk to school, and we had to walk past McKenzie and Holland, across an old creek, across a train track. There was not manned or labelled in any way that there was a train coming. And these are kids 5 and 6 years old walking to primary school, and then I'd go up Birmingham Street to Spotswood State School. Now, my mum was born in 1934, and she was born about 100 metres from McKenzie and Holland. And I was born in 1958, about 150 metres from McKenzie and Holland. And my father was born a bit further out, but he grew up as a child in McKenzie and Holland, and he actually worked there for a time. So McKenzie and Holland was a big deal, and I think how it started was Victoria set up the railways just after the gold boom from the gold rush in 1850, and originally all the trains were manufactured and repaired at a place called Williamstown, which is a sort of the dead end of a line because it's on a little peninsula. And I think in about the 1850s, they made a really big railway yard, one of the biggest in the world actually. And it was an enormous place at a place called Newport. And they had, I think, several hundred acres. It was an enormous factory, and they built all the trains and train tracks and rolling stock and repairs. They did everything. It was an enormous employer in the area. And they soon outgrew that site, so they formed another site just near my school at Spotswood State School called the Ways and Works. And that was a big triangular block, and I think that was in about 1860. And they had that place, and in the middle they wanted to build a road between Melbourne and Williamstown called Williamstown Road, and the Ways and Works was in the way, so they ran a road through the middle of the site. So it actually split into two sites. So you're either on one side of Williamstown Road or the other. And it was just next to my state school. And as a schoolboy, I can remember in winter watching the cranes opposite at the Ways and Works. They were scrapping the old cranes, and it was like a recycling place. They did lots of things there. But they had these 4 old steam cranes, and they had 3 little steam engines and a boiler, had a 3-man crew, and they were rolling stock, and they'd go around and they'd pick up girders and trains and boilers and things and move them around. And so I think there's a stoker, a fireman and a crane operator, so it was a 3-man crew, and this would be in 1964 or 5. And I can remember as a boy watching them, and at certain times when the crane slewed around, you could see into the back of it. Of course, in summer it would be so oppressive. And my friend Dean and I, we could see the man making a cup of tea. They had a billy, and they'd just go to the boiler and they'd tap off a bit of boiling water and make a cup of tea inside the cabin. Well, it wasn't really a cabin, it was a roof and a shelter. And so that was the Ways and Works. But anyway, so then just next door to that, McKenzie and Holland set up, and that would, I think, about 1870 something. And they'd invented and perfected systems to interlock the gates at level crossings, so that if the gates were closed, the bells would ring, and it was impossible to do one without the other. And all those big levers that you see to change the points with a ratchet system, they used to manufacture that. They manufactured all manner of goods for railway all over the east coast of Australia, all the 3 states. So it was a very busy place. And then I think about 20 years after the South Kingsville site, they opened one up in Queensland, and those 2 sites could produce enough to supply the needs of all the railways on the east coast of Australia. And so that company, eventually it got bought out by Westinghouse, and it worked up until from 1870 something to 1996, I think it closed down. But they must have diversified, because the railways, with electronics and things become much less required, and so it shut down in 1996. But during the war, my father worked there, and they used to make Bakelite telephones there. He had a job there making Bakelite telephones, so they did that. I suppose that was something to do with Westinghouse. And then I had another friend, Colin. He worked there, I think in the 1980s or 90s, and they were making car battery chargers. So that brings us back to this. So here we've got a car battery charger. I'll look at I'm guessing this is 1930s or something. So I'm guessing this was made in Melbourne, but I looked, and this hose and plug is, it's rubber. It's rubber insulated, and it's all very sketchy in here because the rubber has just evaporated. And I was just looking at the manufacturer. I don't think you can see it, but it is actually made by HPM, which is Henderson Plastic Moulding. That's a Sydney company. So although this was made in Melbourne, looks like the components were made in Sydney, and I'm trying to look here. The clamps made by a company called FGS, 25 amp, made in New South Wales. And it's just nice for me to see that this, we used to manufacture this type of stuff. There would be a little factory somewhere making that. And I've already talked about the fuse. I think it's pretty dodgy. I like this idea better, but HRC would be better again. Now this one is obviously later, and I did notice that this one, the clamps, I don't think you can read it. You're going to have to take my word. See, they stamp in a plus. See, that's not going to rub off, is it? And that one, yeah, it is made by Utilux. So it is actually different stamping and from a different site. This one's got a plastic flex, so it's a lot better. But I just thought somebody might be interested in the history of McKenzie and Holland. That's my recollections. Good company and lasted for 120, 130 years. And yeah, I think the factory in Queensland closed down in 1980 or something, and then the one in Melbourne. But it was in Stevenson Street, South Kingsville was the front entrance, and it backed onto Sutton Street. It might be called Newport. It's right on the border, but I think because the front gate was in Stevenson Street, I think you could more correctly say it was in South Kingsville. But that's my recollections of a little business. Also in the war, Dad told me that they dug zigzag bomb shelter. So during the war, they were scared about getting bombed, and there was a bomb shelter dug, and it was in a zigzag, so that if a bomb went off, if it was a long straight line, all the people would still get debris and shock on them. But by being in a zigzag, it was much safer for them. And that was there for a long time. I think that was there up until the 60s or something, and then it was filled in. But anyway, that's my recollections. So I'll say uru.